When I was 15 or 16, I was supposed to read Ulysses, so I didn't, right? And in fact, I didn't read it until my mid-20s when I went to university in Texas, and I was actually forced to read it at an American university as part of a course. And it began to open things up for me in an amazing way. But I first started out with Kerouac, Ferlinghetti, Ginsberg, Richard Brautigan, people like that. And what Ulysses did for me was sort of showed me that my hometown was there, and but it wasn't really, honestly, till about 10 years ago that I read it all the way through in one fell swoop. I got sick, right, and I'd been in my father's garden, and I'd been weeding my father's garden, and I cut my arms, and I think I got some weed killer or some fertilizer into my arm, and I got a really serious infection. I had septicemia, and I was like in the hospital for 3 months, anyway, or 3 weeks, I read Ulysses cover to cover. Now, admittedly, I was on morphine, and I was on a little bit of Percocet, but I loved it. And see, what happened to me was my dead grandfather actually walked into the hospital room and sat on the bed with me. And I mean that like in obviously facetiously, but I also truly mean it in that I began to honestly see that this great book, this beautiful book, the greatest novel of the 20th century, actually brought my grandfather alive. I met my grandfather once. I never met my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather would have been the exact same age as Leopold Bloom when he walked the streets of Dublin in 1904. Why do I know my great-grandfather? Because I know Leopold Bloom, for no other reason. So the blood that moves through me right now at this very minute is my great-grandfather's blood. But why do I know him? Because I read Joyce. And Joyce was better for me to understand my distant ancestry. It's better for me to read Joyce than to read any warehouse full of sociological texts or political texts or histories, because it's there. It's at the pulse of the moment. It's a compendium of human experience. It's not just about walking around the streets of Dublin, but everything is raw and alive and clever and beautiful and so a book like that sort of teaches me that literature actually allows us to become ourselves by becoming somebody else, and that's what I like about it. Also, we tend to forget this, but Ulysses is a really funny book, and it's a really sexy book. And if you really want to have a good date with someone, you should bring them along to a reading of Molly's Soliloquy at 2 and 3 in the morning, somewhere deep in a theater in New York, and listen to something. Now that would be that would be a good date. But people forget that because they think, oh, it's too difficult. But the other thing about it is that there is an excellence in difficulty that I'm beginning to appreciate more and more as I get older. So doing the tough thing in your life, whether that be running the extra mile, or whether that be doing another 5 push-ups, or whether that be reading a text that is supposedly more difficult than what you can grasp, is the most perfect thing that you can do, because you stretch yourself and you become bigger. And so many of us are not stretching ourselves anymore. We need to become more agile and embrace the notion of difficulty. There's a sort of celebration of too much of a celebration of the simple going on. The language of Ulysses influenced me hugely. Now, the thing about it is, as I said, I didn't really read it as well as I should have in my early years. But I was reading it even though I didn't know I was reading it. In other words, it influenced generations of Irish writers, and it influenced the way that we think, the way that we talk, the way that we see. And so I was getting it by osmosis. And I think I was kind of lucky in a way that I got it late, and it really hit me late. And now for the past 10 years, every day every Bloomsday in New York, every June 16th, I go out and we do readings on the street in New York, and it's great fun. So and the language of it doesn't necessarily influence me more now, but it was there no matter what. But Joyce was influenced by Hopkins too, and I was influenced by Hopkins a lot as well. I thought Gerard Manley Hopkins was one of the great poets. You know, when you hear the birds go up above you, there's a great poem to Christ our Lord, the Windhover. In his writing of the rolling level underneath him, steady air, dappled dawn, drawn falcon. Anyway, also Dylan Thomas. I really adored Dylan Thomas, and I got to listen to Dylan Thomas because my dad would play it at Christmas time on a record player, which sounds hugely nostalgic now. A record player, you know. And I remember, what I really remember is watching the record player, hearing these things, and you see it go round. And remember the way the stylus used to collect the dust, and the stylus would look like hairy at the end, and then you pick it up and you hear all that static, and little things like that come back to you. The writer in Ireland has always been sort of celebrated all the way back to ancient times, when the Shanachie was the ancient wandering storyteller who went from town to town and told stories and was put up and given the best food and given the best drink and paid for going from place to place. In a way, the writers have legislated a little bit of our sanity, because we were living in a fairly mad country. I mean, this was a country ridden by the church, a country ridden by conservative elements, like and you know, involved with wars and fighting for so many years. That part of the beauty came from like having somebody who was sort of on the edge somewhat, and pushing the notions of Irishness. If we hadn't had our poets, we'd be an even more neurotic place. But I live in New York, and I keep talking about Ireland. But Joyce said in a letter to Frank Budgeon, he said, "I have been so long out of Ireland that I all at once hear her voice in everything." And so what he's talking about was that your relationship to a text, comes from that place that you originally come from, and it's hard to lose it. So even if I live in New York and I write a novel about a gay Muslim ballet dancer in Russia, I still think that I've written an Irish novel.